Welcome to the Storyboards Creativecast. I'm Jen Clark-Hall, and in each episode I'll be chatting to inspirational people working in the creative industries who will share their career stories and advice. If you want to know more about creative careers, are thinking about starting up a creative business, or just want something interesting to listen to for half an hour, this is the podcast for you. Today we're talking with Pippa Fox, who's a producer at the Northern Stage Theatre in Newcastle. It's great to be talking with you today, Pippa. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. So we'll just start by asking you the same question that we ask all our guests is, can you just give us a brief introduction to who you are and what you do?
Of course, yeah. And thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here. So yes, I'm the producer at Northern Stage, which is largest producing theatre in the northeast. So we're a venue in Newcastle city centre, and within the building we have 3 stage spaces that range from 100 seats in our smallest space up to 450 in our biggest space. So we make our own shows throughout the year. We make our own in-house productions several times a year, and then in and amongst those productions we program work from visiting companies that are touring. That can be local companies, or it can be national, and sometimes even international companies that are touring their work. So my job is kind of split into those 2 areas, where I manage the productions that we're making ourselves, and then I program in the visiting work as well. My role as producer sits in the artistic planning team, which is made up of our artistic director, who artistically leads all of the activity that the organisation does. And then there's me as producer, and then we have an associate producer as well. So we kind of share the delivery duties. Our artistic director dreams things up, and we kind of look after the delivery of it.
Awesome. So you make the magic happen.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of amazing technical and creative people who I think actually do the magic. We kind of facilitate the magic happening and kind of organise everyone and manage the budgets and schedule in the meetings, and we kind of bring everything together and recruit the creative team that is going to work with the director on a show and things like that.
Okay, so it sounds like you sort of facilitate a lot of different cogs turning, and you've got to how do you manage all those different cogs? How do you make sure everything goes at the right time and at the same time?
Yeah, it takes a lot of practice. It's quite complicated, but because Northern Stage is so well established, we have a lot of processes in place that we kind of know what our Northern Stage process is. So even though every show is different, and there's always sort of nuances from show to show and different focuses. You know, some shows might be very, very heavy on the technical because there's projection and there's animation and things like that, or one might have live music and dance. So they are very different from one another, but normally you can kind of apply the same producing timeline to each of them. So yeah, once you've kind of learned that and you've got that in your toolkit, you can kind of apply that to any project and show. But yes, it's definitely being organised is a key producing attribute for sure.
Sounds it. So being in the role that you are, is there such a thing as a typical day or a typical week for you?
I mean, it does vary, and we're very lucky that I think our jobs never get boring because we're always constantly working on something new, and we normally have multiple projects and shows happening at the same time. So it's not like you'll work on one show, that will finish, then you'll start on the next one. They all overlap. And I mean, coming up this year, we've got quite a lot of shows in the autumn. So I'm kind of on the same time. I'm doing a lot of shows at the same time at the moment. But I mean, typically in a day, it is an office-based job, typically. So I spend most of my time either working from home or working from the office. There's a lot of emails, there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of phone calls. But outside of that, it's really interesting. You get to go into the rehearsal rooms, you get to go to script readings, you get to watch a lot of shows, you get invited to watch a lot of shows from visiting companies. So there's a lot of really fun stuff, as well as a lot of admin.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of perks, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So going back to your journey to becoming to where you are now, what sort of started that spark off for you? What brought you to where you are today?
So my interest and my passion and the thing that I've always done since I was really, really tiny is dance. So I was carted off to ballet lessons as a very small child, and that was the hobby that I always stuck with. Other hobbies kind of came and went, but dance was always the constant. So then I finished school at 16 after my GCSEs, and then I went off to college to study dance, and then eventually went on to university to study dance as well. And then when I graduated, I did a bit of freelance dancing and teaching work and choreography, but kind of found that I didn't really, there was something missing. I wasn't really enjoying it as much as I thought I was going to, particularly teaching. I thought that was what I wanted to do, and once I started doing it, I thought it's maybe not for me. So then that's when I kind of went more into the theatre world, and I got an internship at a theatre doing marketing and administration. And then kind of just from there started to do a bit more admin work, and then a bit more producing and programming admin to support that, and then realized I was really interested in that, and then moved to another company where I did project management, and then sort of realized that producing was where I really wanted to pursue. So then I started to do more producing, and then came to Northern Stage 2.5 years ago as producer. So yeah, it's been a slightly twisty path, but I think everyone I speak to in the arts has had quite a twisty path to work out what it is that they want to do. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think there's any straight road to any sort of creative job, is there? You zigzag from one thing to another.
Absolutely. And I think you kind of need to try a few things out to work out what it is you really love and what it is you're passionate about. And if you go with your first assumption, I mean, sometimes maybe some people get it right first time, and that's brilliant. But for most people I know, they've tried a few things out and worked out what it is they like and what it is they don't like, which was certainly the case with me. Didn't really like teaching, kind of really loved admin and theatre in that world. So it was a good.
So what keeps you passionate and motivated about what you do every day?
I guess I'm one of the really, really lucky people that my hobby and my job kind of cross over. I mean, I love dance. As I said, that's kind of what I always did growing up, and that's what I trained in. And I still dance now as a hobby and for fun. But I grew up going to the theatre. I love going to the theatre. So the fact that as part of my job, I'm in a theatre building every single day, and that I get to see shows all the time, that in itself keeps me pretty happy and motivated, because it's something I'm interested in. It's something I'm passionate about. I think there's also something really magical as a producer. You're involved in a production right from day one, when it's just a tiny, tiny seed of an idea in a director's head. And that's all it is. And you get to see it all the way through from that to opening night in front of hundreds of people. And it's really exciting seeing something come together gradually and how it builds up. And I always get really excited when I'm starting on a new project. And there's always stressful times throughout making a show, but it's always really exciting to see it come together.
Does it feel like there's a point at which there's a lot of, like you say, a lot of emailing, a lot of meetings, and then all of a sudden it just explodes into this, everyone's busy, everyone's doing something, and you've got to really make sure that everyone's in the right place at the right time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the even very small shows have a massive team of people behind them, and gradually seeing everyone like coming together and building your team that's going to make that show. And yeah, like you say, there's always a moment of kind of chaos when everyone's at that start of that journey and you've recruited everyone, but and then it's always a mad rush, but it all comes together, and it's nearly always beautiful.
I'm sure it is all the time. And with being essentially a leader of a team, a tribe of people, how do you keep those people motivated and keep them inspired with what they do? Because I'm sure that there are times that you all possibly deal with things like creative block and you feel a bit stuck.
It very much depends on the scale of the show. I think I mean, the person who's driving the show artistically and creatively is the director. So they are a key role in keeping the team around them motivated, and how they interact with their creative team has a really big impact on the show and how the show turns out in the end. I think as the sort of the person that's a bit more behind the scenes, kind of organizing everyone, I think it's just about really, really clear communication. Like, people work really well when they know what's happening, they're up to date with things, they've got the answers they need, they've got the resources they need to do their job. And I think that's kind of where I see my job as a producer, is to help everyone with that. Whereas I think the director or the artistic director of a project, they lead things creatively, and it's their job to kind of keep that motivation going, whereas I think it's our job to keep the sort of logistical motivation going. And if you get the two of those going, then it's a really great collaboration between everyone, and if one suffers, then it kind of affects the other one.
And how have you managed? Obviously, over the last year, it's just been a nightmare, particularly for entertainment and the arts. You know, you'll have been the first to feel the effects of just everything going within 24 hours. But behind the scenes, there will have had to have been things ticking over to make sure that you do have things ready for when theatres reopen, so you can draw people back in. And how have you managed to, or how have you had to adapt your working practices during the pandemic to make sure you maintain, you know, good working relationships with your colleagues, which you're not now seeing every day?
Yeah, it's been a super, super strange year. You know, when all of this kicked off last March, we thought it was going to be a very short-term temporary thing, and now we're almost a year and a half into it, and we've still not been able to reopen our venue in that time. So working for a closed venue is very strange in itself, and we've had to find new ways of working. You know, majority of the time we've all been working from home, and we've been doing everything on Zoom and Teams and email, and in a lot of ways that's made communication even harder, and sharing information between the team even harder, but also even more important to do than ever, because we don't get a chance to see each other and quickly sort of say, oh, by the way, that thing we were chatting about last week, you know, everything kind of has to be on an email or a scheduled meeting. In terms of kind of the projects that we've had to kind of keep the venue ticking over, we've looked a lot more into digital than we ever have done before. And, you know, people watching theatre from home. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see whether, once the world reopens again, whether people actually still want to watch anything from home, or whether that was just people did it because they had to, because they couldn't go to the theatre. So it'll be interesting to see how much of that stays and how much of that goes. But I think for us, we love making live theatre in a venue. That's what we do. That's what we're best at. So we're just really, really excited to have live shows again and have our audiences back. So now we're sort of, the start of this year has all been about planning for the second half of this year, when we're hoping to have those audiences back.
And when you were close to audiences, live audiences, what you say you did a lot of digital things. Can you give me an example of one of the digital things that you produced?
Yeah, so we weren't able to go ahead with our big family Christmas show. Every year we have our big annual family Christmas show in our, what we call our epic space, which is stages 1 and 2 combined. We take the wall out that divides the two spaces, and we have a really, really big, large scale Christmas show. So we weren't able to do that this Christmas. So we looked at a filmed alternative. So we did a brand new show, and we got a creative team together. They wrote an adaptation of The Emperor's New Clothes. And we had a much smaller cast than we would normally, and we knew from day one that we were going to be filming that for digital distribution. There wouldn't be a live audience coming in. So, I mean, it's a whole new skill set and world of making digital work or filmed work. You make something for the theatre, and then you kind of have to completely re-rehearse it for all of your camera positions, and you think about where the cameras are going to be, and the lighting and the sound levels are affected and things like that. And then how to make those digital films accessible. We know how to do BSL interpretation for a live show, but what are the processes to get a film BSL interpreted, or a film captioned, rather than someone captioning it audio, describing it live in the venue for an audience. So yeah, there was a lot of learning in terms of those timelines and how to make that, and also what platform to distribute it on. Instead of people coming into the theatre, what what are you going to host your video on? How do people book a ticket and watch something online? It's not quite as simple as just bunging something on YouTube. There was a lot more to it that we had to learn. But it was really great to learn. It was really interesting. It was hard at times, but we were really, really excited at what the take up was, like particularly with schools and colleges. We had a lot of schools and college bookings, and a lot of people from all over the world watched it. Actually, we were really surprised at, I guess we thought, because, you know, we're a venue in the Northeast, but actually we did get people from all over the world, or people telling their families about it who maybe have family members who live abroad. So the fact that you can get such an international reach with digital is amazing. You're reaching more people than you would normally.
Mm-hmm. And that's quite a nice thing, I suppose, because in the time that we've had over the last year and a half, it'll have probably been something that's brought families and friends together over a digital means, but they can then, you know, after they've watched it separately, they can come together and talk about it. And I mean, I've got two young boys, and one of their godparents bought us tickets, a digital ticket to see Father Christmas that was done by, I think it was a theatre down in London, the Lyceum perhaps, and it was a brilliant production. It was really, really good. And, you know, it had this one lady, they were obviously socially distanced on the stage, and there was this one lady in this almost like capsule off the side of the stage that was all decked out in fairy lights and lovely imagery, and she did all the music and all the sound effects for everything. And then there was the one guy who was playing Father Christmas, and then there was a couple of extras who were doing the puppets for the dog in Father Christmas and some of the other things. And it was done so brilliantly, and I was a bit dubious to start with, thinking, oh gosh, what's this going to be like? Because you know you go to the theatre, like you go to the cinema to be immersed in this environment and to have that immersive experience, to feel completely drawn into what you're seeing on the stage. And I was a bit, not concerned, but a bit unsure about whether I'd still feel that with it being on screen. But actually, you know, we made a really nice evening of it. We got the kids in, we got us in, we all had like cocoa and some snacks and snuggled up under rugs and watched it all together. And it was a really lovely thing to do. And it helped to get us in the mood for Christmas and lift our spirits a little bit. So I think even though it's been a digital platform, I think it's probably still, for us anyway, it definitely made us feel like it was a special moment.
I think there's a really big thing, particularly at Christmas, like, you know, for a lot of families, your annual trip to their theatre to see a panto or a Christmas show, that's a really big, you know, Christmas tradition, isn't it? That's something everyone looks forward to every year. So I think even though there are other aspects of our digital work that maybe didn't take off in quite the way we would have hoped, or, you know, there are other trickier aspects to it, at Christmas, it certainly felt like, you say, that shared experience with, even though you can't go with your family, you can still watch it and talk about it together, that maybe you don't get through other shows so much. There's not quite as much of a shared experience around it than you get at Christmas. But yeah, I think that was kind of our aim for that show that year, was just to kind of say, it's been a really rubbish year. Let's just try and bring a little bit of Christmas magic and happiness to everyone. And yeah.
What was the feedback like from your audiences who tuned in for that and watched them?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, majority of our audiences were the audiences that would come to see the show live. So I think there was a lot of really, really lovely feedback from people saying, we love our, you know, annual trip to Northern Stage, and we couldn't come this year, so this was a brilliant alternative, but still really looking forward to coming back in person when we can. There was some really lovely feedback from some families who say, well, actually, it's really tricky for us to come to the theatre with our child because they've got like severe autism or sort of other like learning disabilities that make it really hard to come to really busy, packed, noisy venues. And that actually that was a really great alternative for them, and it's something that they're sort of interested in more longer term going forwards. I think there were some people that just thought, oh, it's not really for us, like thanks for trying, but, you know, we'll wait until we can come back again. And that's totally fine, because digital and watching stuff at home is not for everyone. It can't replace the magic of coming to the theatre live, but yeah, in general it was really great. And like I say, with schools and hospices and hospitals and community groups, we were really, really pleased with the amount of groups that like sat together to watch it as well, which was really lovely to see, because we'd made it free for schools and groups. And then for families and for people watching at home, there was like a family ticket. But yeah, it was really great to see the number of people that engaged with it, for sure.
Oh, that's really positive to hear. So going forwards, like I said before, the arts and the entertainment industry have been so severely hit by the pandemic, and the loss of audiences and the loss of being able to get people into venues. Do you have kind of plans in place at Northern Stage going forwards to resurrect that within the Northern Stage, but also plans beyond the Northern Stage? Do you collaborate with other theatres about how you can go forwards positively from this and make sure that if something like this, God forbid, happened again, how could you cope with that sort of situation? Or are you thinking about initiatives and incentives and adapted working practices?
I think now we've proved that we all can work from home and we can all work remotely when we need to. Sort of a blended approach between office and home might be a thing going forwards. And certainly, there's a lot of meetings that can happen with not just the people that work at Northern Stage, but if we're working with lighting designers or sound designers or designers that are based elsewhere in the UK, they don't always have to be traveling to Newcastle. We can do a lot of those prep meetings on Zoom, which will help our carbon footprint, which is a big thing. Making theatre more sustainable and as green as possible is a big aim and ambition over the coming years. And in terms of sort of building audiences' confidence in coming back to the theatre, that's certainly what we want across this autumn period now, when we're reopening and having audiences back and having shows back, that we kind of want to use that period as a way to build confidence with people coming back and making sure we're being really, really clear on our safety procedures, our cleaning procedures to help build that confidence. We won't increase anything above like the social distance seating capacities until we're 100% allowed to, and even if we need to keep them for a bit longer to make people feel comfortable, because it's one thing going and seeing your friends after a long time, but it's another thing to sit in a crowded 400 seat venue after so long. So I think it's a slow and gradual approach. We're not for a second thinking we'll go back to the way things were, in a week's time. It's going to take a lot of time to build our confidence in managing a venue again and building audiences' confidences again.
Do you feel like your role as a producer has changed in the last 16 months in terms of, you were saying, there's a lot more meetings on Teams and Zoom and things like that, but the bread and butter of your role, do you feel like that has changed?
It has, in terms of, even going forwards now, I think we know that not all audiences will feel comfortable coming back to the theatre. So we'll still be thinking about digital. We'll still be thinking about having streamed options available for our live performances for people who are still shielding or not comfortable coming back. So, I mean, that's a whole new addition into the producing process that we're not used to. I think day to day it's not that dissimilar, because I guess kind of like I was saying, once you kind of got a good producing process in place, you can kind of apply that to lots of different projects, whether they're COVID safe projects or whether they're live shows, whether it's something digital. So I guess that side of my job hasn't changed too much. I mean, sadly, we did have to have, like a lot of arts organisations and theatres have over the last year, there have been redundancies and there have been restructures. So there's probably more than ever, there's more work to do but less people to do it. So I guess everyone is having to take on a bit more now than they used to, which is kind of a sector wide thing. That's not us being like individual in that respect. But yeah, I don't see that it's sort of changed fundamentally. It still feels like the same job, particularly now we are looking at reopening again. I mean, over the last year it hasn't felt like a normal job, but that's because it's not been normal.
No. Thinking about your role, what's the best thing about what you do? What do you enjoy the most about what you do?
I guess I kind of mentioned it earlier, but the amount of shows that you get to see, the amount of events you get invited to, the amounts of different people you get to meet all the time is great. I think for me though, probably my favourite thing is the fact that I get to introduce my friends and family to a whole new world of theatre or comedy or musicals or dance that they wouldn't necessarily have heard about or know about, and that can spark some really, really interesting conversations when you're introducing people to things that they've never seen before. or you're having the shared experience of none of you have ever seen something like that before. And it's nice to be able to bring my sort of personal life and my work life together a bit more in terms of sparking those conversations and introducing family and friends to the arts a bit more maybe than they have been involved with before.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait to take my boys to the theatre. I mean, it's something I grew up with a lot. I've lost count how many times I've seen Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats on stage, which I think might be an embarrassing admission for many people, but I love it. I wanted to be Victoria, the white cat from Cats when I was little.
She was always my favourite. When I went to see it in London when I was young, the lady who was performing as the little white cat it was her last performance, and she signed all the programs. So I got a signed program.
Oh my goodness me, that's magical. But yeah, I remember so vividly the experience of just going to the theatre when I was younger and coming home and singing all the songs in the car on the way home. And I just can't wait for my boys to be able to do that. I mean, the youngest one's only 4, so he spent a good year and a half of his young life not being able to go and do these things. So the pantomime is going to be a big thing, I think, for us this year.
Absolutely. And you never forget your first theatrical experience, or you always remember that. I mean, I certainly do. I remember those trips, those family trips to the theatre when I was young and when I was growing up, and it does have a lasting impact. And those early visits for kids are really important, I think, to kind of spark that interest and that passion in it, even if it's just a hobby and it's a nice thing to do as they grow up and they don't want to work in the industry. It's still really, we always read about how beneficial the arts are. If you're taking part in them, if you're watching them, they're really beneficial to our physical and mental health. And if you can make a career in it as well, and it's what you love to do, then it's even better, isn't it?
Do you feel like there's a downside at all to what you do? Because you talk so positively and passionately about what you do. It feels like there probably isn't one for you.
There are a lot of meetings, I have to say. As a producer, there are a lot of meetings, and that can kind of leave you with, it can kind of make your to-do list grow and grow, because every meeting gives you another 5 things you need to go and do. But because you're always in meetings, you never get the chance to get through the to-do list. So kind of keeping on top of the workload and keeping a work-life balance can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. And the role of a producer can be quite admin heavy. You can spend a lot of time on your emails and, a lot of time on spreadsheets. I do love a spreadsheet, but, sometimes I get spreadsheet fatigue. I do find there are times where I find myself getting very bogged down in that day-to-day and that admin, and I kind of have to step back and, right now it's time to go and read a script. Now it's time to make sure I go and see, even if it's online at the moment, but go and see something, because I'm becoming too admin heavy and I'm forgetting the bits that give me joy from the job. So there certainly can be downsides.
So it's kind of important to remember to keep that balance between the things that bring you joy and the practical things that need to be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
How long have you actually been in this role for?
So I joined Northern Stage in August 2019, so almost 2 years I've been at Northern Stage. And prior to that, I worked for 5 years as project manager for a physical theatre company. And then before that, I was in an assistant sort of admin and assistant producing role at another venue down in Suffolk. So kind of trying to tot it up now. Sort of.
It's scary when you think about how long you've been doing something.
So I guess kind of 8 or 9 years is kind of from stopping teaching and dancing. I've kind of been working in theatre and sort of along the producing kind of timeline for kind of 8 or 9, coming up to.
So in that time, throughout your entire creative journey, so with the dancing and then going into theatre, what is it that you're most proud of regarding your work?
I mean, you always get a very proud moment when on opening night of a show that you've worked on from start to finish. I think I was very lucky that Gecko, which was the physical theatre company that I worked with, they were a touring company. So I kind of got the perspective of the touring company, and then now I'm sort of back in the venue side of things, and it's really great to have the perspective of both. But with Gecko, they were a national and international touring company, so I got to work on some really, really exciting international projects, and I got to run international residencies and international education projects, and so I got to travel, which was really brilliant. And I mean, it sounds silly because obviously it is a different part of the world, but it is a whole new world in terms of organising international projects. There's a whole another like sort of layer of things you have to think of. And, you know, when you don't know the places, but it's, yeah, when you sort of, you're planning a big international project like that and you get to go abroad for a few weeks and see it happen and be there to deliver it, I was really, really proud of those projects. And yeah, they were some of the most enjoyable, but also some of the hardest work.
Is there any one production that kind of sticks out in your mind in particular that you've worked on?
I mean, so when I first came to Northern Stage, one of the first shows I worked on, because I'd sort of started in August, one of the very first shows I worked on, in fact, probably the first show that I was the lead producer on, was the big Christmas show. And that was really magical. I think there's always just something magical about theatre at Christmas time. So for that to be, and it's big scale as well, because it's in the Epic space, it's large scale, it's a much bigger audience, it's a really long 6-week run. And it's got a really big team behind it. So I think getting just stuck in at the deep end and getting to do a big Christmas show at a venue again after working for a touring company for a few years, that was a really lovely moment. And that was the Snow Queen that year that we did. And I think at Gecko, I mean, I wasn't there when the show was being made, like, so the show already existed, but it was still touring when I worked there. And we did a lot of extra education projects and activity around it because the show explored a lot of themes of mental health. So that was really meaningful, getting to work. So the show was called Institute, and there are a lot of themes of male mental health in the show. And so whilst the show was still touring, we partnered with Mind, the national charity, to do a sort of series of workshops, talks and resources alongside the show. So that was really great to kind of work on, because I guess that was maybe one of the first times where I saw a really, really meaningful participatory program alongside a show, rather than the two being separate. So those are kind of two off the top of my head that feel really special.
Yeah, and it sounds really, it's really nice that you're able to collaborate with people like Mind, because like you say, you know, participating in the arts and culture, it can have such a positive effect on your mental health and well-being. And I think that, like you say, it's been more important now more than ever, because I don't think anyone has gone through the last year and a half and not been affected either mentally or physically by what the world has been going through. It's, you know, it's such an important thing to be able to feel like you've got something like theatre or art or something creative that you can go to and you can turn to in this really strange time, to be able to get some sort of fulfillment and
absolutely.
joy.
Yeah.
And I mean, is that something going forwards that you would look to do more of, work with charities and mental health charities in particular, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, Institute was a perfect example of the content of a show aligning so perfectly with a program that could be delivered alongside it. And I think it's always sort of something we look out for, you know, whenever you're making a show, particularly if the content or the themes of it are something that could affect people. I think you kind of have a bit of a duty of care to kind of, you know, consider how it might affect audience members, and, you know, to think about carefully what you put alongside the show to kind of help people, and also just to kind of spread awareness as well, like even if it's not necessarily sort of holding workshops to help people, but is it a post-show discussion that encourages people to stay afterwards and ask questions about a topic that they maybe don't know very much about or are a bit nervous to talk about. So yeah, I definitely, I think there's always room for kind of looking alongside a show as to what extra activity can be delivered. And sometimes you don't always feel equipped to deal with that. You know, I'm a theatre producer, I'm not a mental health expert, I'm not an expert on, I don't know, if a show had themes of domestic violence. I don't work in that area, so it's always really important to collaborate with the people that can offer that support and do have that knowledge and expertise.
And looking to the future, if we were to have this sort of discussion again in 5 to 10 years' time, where would you see yourself within the creative industries? Would you still see yourself working in theatre, or would you maybe see yourself branching out and going elsewhere?
I think I'd definitely still love to be working in theatre. I might potentially look to move a bit more back to dance and physical theatre, just because that's my background, and my sort of, yeah, my well, I mean, I'm very passionate about theatre and I love my job, but my interest growing up was always dance. So I think if I was to go and work for a company again, as opposed to a venue, I would be quite interested to work for a dance company or a physical theatre company again. But I guess, yeah, just to carry on along the producing journey, I still feel like I've got an awful lot to learn. And you can sort of, from producer, you can move up to senior producer or executive producer. And that in turn gives you a more detailed job in terms of looking at the structure of a company, or how a company develops. And that's something I still feel like I've got a lot that I would like to learn about, in terms of running companies rather than just making the shows. So yeah, maybe a more senior role and maybe a bit more dance.
What would your advice be to someone who is interested in the theatre and interested in going down a similar path to you, in terms of they may not have started out as in dancing, but they may have started out doing some sort of other theatre like acting, or so what would your advice be for someone wanting to follow a path into the creative industries, like in your area or in another discipline, perhaps in theatre?
I mean, it sounds super cheesy, but just say yes to lots of things, because you never really know you never know who you're going to meet, or what the next thing is going to lead on to, or what you might find out about and what you might get to try following on from that. So I'm a big believer in saying yes rather than saying no to things. I think also just going and seeing a lot of stuff. Like it's really important, whether you want to sort of be behind the scenes producing or whether you want to be, front of stage a bit more. But it's kind of important to know what it is you really like. And I think you can't work out what you like unless you go and see a lot of things. And that involves going and seeing a lot of rubbish stuff. But how do you know that you didn't like it, and if you didn't go to see it, kind of thing? Yeah, I think a lot of my experience in terms of producing has been on the job. I mean, my degree was great. I had a lot of varied modules in my degree, and I've carried on doing a lot of training and courses in various things. I've done some like finance, first aid training, tour booking, contracts, all those sorts of things. I've done courses since then, and courses are great, but really you learn the most on the job. I've learned to be a producer from doing it and from doing jobs. So yeah, I guess just see a lot of stuff, say yes to a lot of stuff, and see what happens.
And you said you took an internship. Was that kind of was that the turning point at which you thought, yes, this is what I want to do?
I think so, yeah. I'd sort of, that's after the time where I'd done some dancing and some teaching, and was thinking, oh, this is not really right. I love theatre. I know I love theatre, and I got a chance to do an internship, and that was a foot in the door, because then I was kept on from my internship. I was kept on there in an assistant role, and I gradually worked up, and then moved to different companies and venues after that. But yeah, so for me that was a turning point, and it was quite a safe way to try if I liked something or not. There wasn't the pressure of it being straight in at the job, and it gave you experience, because I mean it's so hard at the moment, trying to find jobs, particularly trying to find your first jobs, because people want experience, but if no one gives you the experience, how do you have experience to put on your CV? So
yeah, it's that catch 22, isn't it? You need 5 years experience to do this job, but you can't get the 5 years experience because no one's going to give you the job in the first place.
So yeah, for me that internship was definitely like my first foot in the door and my first taster at finding if I liked it or not.
And was that internship, was that at a fairly small theatre, or was it medium, large?
It was a mid-scale theatre. It was the Theatre Royal in Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk. Fun fact, the only surviving Regency Playhouse that's still a working theatre in the UK. I did sort of marketing and admin in my internship, and then was kept on as an administration assistant. And as part of that, I did a lot of the admin for the producing and programming team, which I kind of thought, oh, well, this is interesting. And then I sort of, and then sort of went down that path, did more of that.
And are those sorts of internships quite widely available in different theatres around the country?
I think they do less of them now, because there is, quite rightly, there is a big kind of backlash on expecting people to work for free, which when I was, in my early 20s, no one cared. So there are less internship opportunities now, I think, because quite rightly they should all be paid opportunities for people. But obviously that means that companies can afford to do less of them. But they definitely do exist, and I think just keep an eye out on your local theatre and your local companies to you. Follow them on social media, check their websites, sign up to arts jobs, because there's always opportunity postings on Arts Council jobs. And if anything, just ask. I mean, even if there's not internships, most theatres or bigger theatres tend to have work experience programmes or can host placements like in school holidays and things.
Does Northern Stage do that?
We have a work experience programme, which we run. We're running it in the summer this year. It's in June this year. It used to be, well, obviously it's not run for the last year, so I'm not sure how regular it will be after this year. But yeah, we're hoping to restart it again this summer.
Oh, that sounds excellent. You'll probably get loads of emails.
Excellent. I hope we do.
And coming to our last point in the chat, what going forwards, you're saying you've got lots of things planned for the September time, the autumn, and that's when you're planning to fully reopen, is that right?
Yes. So we're hoping we're not going to have any live shows until the autumn season. So we're hoping to reopen in August and have our first live show again at the end of August, and then have shows throughout autumn, and then hopefully have our big Christmas show this year. Well, it won't be postponed again. It won't be. We will have our live Christmas show this year.
Think positive.
But before we reopen, we've got a really, really exciting programme of outdoor work happening across June and July. So we've got some pop-up venues around and about in Newcastle, and we've got some commissioned pieces that are going to be happening all over the northeast, sort of Bamburgh, Sunderland, Stockton.
Oh, fantastic.
Out of the coast, lots of those neighbourhood commissioned projects that are going to be happening across June. So yeah, outdoor work in the summer, and then hopefully having back everyone back in the theatre in the autumn.
Oh, fantastic. So where would people go then to find out about those outdoor projects that you're doing over the summer? Because they sound amazing.
So we've our website has our What's On section on our website, which is northernstage.co.uk, and we're also on social media at Northern Stage, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. There's also, until those outdoor projects start, we've got a lot of our digital content that we created at the start of the year that's still on our YouTube channel and still on our website, so people can watch those as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And are you allowed to tell us what your big first live production is going to be?
I'm not, because the announcement hasn't gone out yet. The announcement is going out in June, and I think our comms team would tell me off if I said what it was.
Okay.
But we do know what our Christmas show is, because that was a postponement from before the pandemic. So we're hoping that our Christmas show will be The Sorcerer's Apprentice this year, which should have been 2020's show, but it's just a year late. But it'll be even more magical, I'm sure.
If there's any tickets left, I might bring my two boys, because they love that story. My youngest loves that one.
Oh yeah, please do. That'd be lovely.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today, Pippa. It's been great talking to you, and so interesting to understand a bit more about what the producer's role is, because like you say, it's one of those roles and people go, so what's that?
Yeah, you hear the type of producer a lot, but and also it's very different from industry to industry. A theatre producer is very different to a film and TV producer, and yeah, it's always good to explain kind of what you do, because a lot of people just kind of go, I know that word, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah. Oh no, it's good to have a bit more clarity. So thank you very much for coming on the show, and wishing you and all your team and everyone at Northern Stage all the best with the productions that you're doing over the summer. I think it's great that you've continued doing the digital platform stuff, and then starting with the outdoor stuff, and then the exciting live audience stuff back again in end of August. So we'll really look forward to that.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Storyboards Creativecast. I hope you'll join me for the next one. Don't forget you can find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter to keep up to date with all our latest information and events. Why not subscribe to our YouTube channel as well? You can also email us at info.thestoryboard@gmail.com.